Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people looking to live life at their peak potential. Chock full of real-world tools and knowledge that you can apply in your life today. By providing you with a lens into the lives, beliefs, practices, and actions of those who are already living extraordinary lives, the Performance Enhancing Podcast will help you shift your mindset or create that change in your daily rituals and habits so you can explode with success in the areas of life that are most important to you. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with Satori Prime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, my friend, and welcome back to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. And today we're going to continue with our little tribute to Wayne Dyer. Today's topic, we're going to look at self-acceptance. This I took from an interview that he did with Nick Ortner, which has a very interesting tapping methodology. So if you want to check that out, please go do that. But during this interview, one of the questions that Nick asked Wayne is about self-acceptance. And we've spoken about this many, many times, even in this segment, right, about Wayne, which is looking at the most painful situations in your life as your greatest teachers. This is just a slightly different cut at it because what he adds to the conversation is that we are all divine. We've all come from this divine energy, divine love, whatever you want to call it, you know. And because of that, when we don't accept ourselves, if you're a man or woman of faith, if you don't accept yourself, then you're basically saying, I don't accept this higher power. I don't accept the divine, which for a lot of people is counterintuitive, right? So I want you guys to listen to this interview real quick, and then we'll come back and actually talk a little bit about it. But what I want you to pay attention to is how he describes where we came from and who we are and our divine energy. And hopefully you can hear something in that will allow you to perceive your situations, yourself, in a slightly different way, to give yourself a little more room. Because sometimes it's not about, we can't go from 0 to 100, right? But it's about opening the door a crack, seeing the light, just a crack, and then that allows for us to experience life newly. It gives us a little bit of a momentum where we can tap into something. So hopefully, if this is an area of your life that you've been struggling with, and I know for thousands of students that Guy and I have coached, self-acceptance is something that a lot of people struggle with. And by self-acceptance, I mean, all these people want to give love and be grateful and be giving, and yet they're not that with themselves. And if you're not that with yourself, then how can you be that with others? One of Wayne Dyer's amazing examples is, what juice do you get when you squeeze an orange? Orange juice, right? You can't squeeze an orange and get pineapple. You can't squeeze an orange and get grape juice or apple juice, right? So whatever is inside of you, when you're squeezed, that's the only thing that can come out. So if you don't have self-love, then you can't really give true love to others, right? So I hope that kind of makes sense. So let's listen to what Wayne has to say, and then we'll loop back around and continue the conversation.
And I think that concept of self-love is so primal to healing. Like, you know, we tend to we want to push away. We want to reject the parts of ourselves that are in pain, that are angry. So tell me about self-acceptance. What does it mean to you? Why do you think that's so important?
Well, you know, it's like if you don't accept yourself, nothing else, no one else is either. You know, it's like, I think of it as like we're all creations of God. We all come from the same place. You know, T.S. Eliot said that you know, we shall not cease from exploration, but at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. And he was speaking about death, and I don't take that as an explanation of death. I take that as an explanation of an understanding that we all emerged from this place, the same place, that we're all connected. Everything in this universe is connected. Larry Dossey has just written a beautiful book called One Mind, and I've just finished reading it, and it's like showing scientifically how everything is connected to everything in this universe, and you can't take anything and not see the connection to it, especially at the quantum level. So that, so you, who you are, is a creation of God. You know, in my book Wishes Fulfilled, I talk about, it's like, one of the things you have to recognize is that your highest self is God. You must be like what you came from. So a little tiny spark of who you are is the Tao, is God, is divine mind, is Krishna, is consciousness, is Buddha, whatever you want to call it. And the Tao, the opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. We can't find a name for it. It's just like, but it's the best name we can come for it is something called love. It's just love. It's divine love. And so this is what you came from. So if you don't accept yourself, you're not accepting something that you know is the creation of God. You know, because truly, I mean, it's like the greatest wisdom that you can have is the recognition that you are a piece of this divinity. And I walk around with just in a, you know, Rumi said, you know, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. I'm just in a state of bewilderment about it all. And when you accept yourself, you love yourself. And when you love yourself, that's what you have to give away. And the only thing that you can give away, and that's what a saint is, someone who can only give love away, because that's all they have inside. That's been my goal in my life, is to have no enemies, to have nothing, and particularly not to make an enemy of myself. To love everything about myself. And while I was going through the last 6 months of this pain, the stuff we tapped on down in Australia and so on, most of the time, and you heard me say it many times, say there's a lesson in this for me. And I just did a public television special, another public television special. And when I got an hour and a half before the show to start, I got one of these attacks again in the neck, and I was just like, you know, how am I going to get through this thing and so on. And I said a prayer. My wife was there, 2 of my girls were there, we were in the room, I had my arms around them, and I said, if I'm supposed to endure this pain, you know, for whatever reason that I don't even understand yet, I'm willing to do it. But could I please just have the next couple of hours so that I could at least get through this experience? And it just dissolved. And I was able, you were there, you were in the audience, and I was able to go out there and do it. And then the pain returned the next day, and I went right back to that state, and I still do it now. And I can feel it even now as we're talking about it a little bit here. And instead of cursing it, instead of being angry at it, I accept it as my dharma. This is, you know, and whatever it is that I have to learn from it, generally speaking, every difficulty I've had in my life, getting divorced, literally being someone who is addicted to substances, including alcohol, letting go of, you know, those kinds of beliefs that those are terrible things that I should be ashamed of. They've been amongst my greatest teachers. And this pain is just another one of those things. And generally speaking, I now can go out and help people who live in chronic pain. And you do a lot of this with your tapping. You know, I've seen you do it on stage, you know, with people. In fact, when we were out in Australia, that one woman, what was it? She couldn't even...
Well, there's one lady with a frozen shoulder who couldn't move her arm.
Who hadn't been able to move her arm in years.
In 20 minutes, she got it up like that.
You
know?
So it's like... And that comes from just accepting yourself, and actually instead of cursing the pain, because when you curse the pain and get angry at it, you get angry. Every cell of your being goes through that same anger, and what you want to do is just get to that peaceful place within yourself where you say, you know, when you trust in yourself, you're really trusting in the wisdom that created you, you know, and the wisdom that created you is infinite, and it's formless. And so your thoughts are in that same category. Have thoughts that are aligned with that divine presence. You'll see it going away.
Really, really powerful stuff. And a few amazing takeaways is when you go through some sort of pain. So he's dealt with chronic pain in the latter part of his life. He's dealt with having to overcome leukemia in the latter part of his life. And there's 2 options there, right? He could have hated the situation, made it wrong, all that kind of stuff, or practice what he preaches, which is grant love to every situation, be thankful for every situation. And in turn, by doing so, that famous line, God only sends you as much as you can handle. Well, God sent that to him for a very specific reason. And now by him having gone through it on his own, he can teach through experience, not theory, others who are going through that. And because he's experienced it, then he has a completely different perspective from which to share. It's no longer just a book and theory, right? It's great to get relationship advice from someone who's never been in relationships. It doesn't really make sense. They had to have gone through that. They've had to have gone the ups, the heartbreaks, the possible divorces, right? In order to share with you the other side of it. So I think that's really, really powerful. The other quote that he shares, which I love, is sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. And this speaks to more of the beginner's mind. Something very, very difficult to do. But if you can imagine, or maybe you already have young kids or can remember young kids, to young kids, a lot of things are new, right? They walk around bewildered. They walk around in awe of life. And it can be anything. It can be the simplest things. But to them, because it's new, it's awe. It's bewilderment. As we get older, we don't experience life that way anymore. Everything is just, I've seen this, same old, all that kind of stuff. And because of that, we never get to see the situation for what it actually is. And that's just a function of how the brain works. If you heard part 1 of my Use Fear as Your Guide conversation, I started discussing that. And when we go back and you'll listen to part 2, you'll hear really the science behind why all of that stuff is. But for now, if you could just assume, and this is a crazy assumption, but if you could just assume that you don't know this situation and you don't know this person and all the history and all the rules and all the things that you've made up all the years have nothing to do with this specific situation, you're going to see how you can bring a completely different action, a completely different perspective to this situation or person and have a completely different result. So another really great thing to remember. And lastly, self-acceptance comes from you being part of the divine, which is what I said before. And you not being part of if you not accepting that means you don't accept this divine love, this divine energy. And lastly, you have to trust in the energy that created you. And by doing that, you'll always be free. And what I mean by free is no situation and no circumstance or no person can ever make you feel anything. That's your choosing. That's 100% your choosing. We're always going to have situations. We're always going to have circumstances. We're going to always have people come into our lives. It's what we say about that and how we then react to that matters. And if you can be aware of those interpretations, if you can be aware of those reactions, then every day you work on that, that to me is ultimate spirituality, right? The greatest part of the Bible is, or the greatest rule of the Bible is, love thy neighbor like you love yourself. It is the simplest and most difficult thing to do. We all know innately that that's the way we're supposed to act. And it is very, very difficult to put ourselves in someone else's shoes because truly we only see not who they are, we see who we are in those people. And so the things that we hate or the things that we don't accept in ourselves, I should say, are the things that will keep showing up in others. So if you're someone that is annoyed by obnoxious people or annoyed by people who are late or anything like that, whatever it is that you're annoyed by, you want to take a look because usually the things that annoy you in others are the things that we're afraid to look in ourselves. They are the things that we don't yet accept in ourselves. And in doing that, you will have less and less judgment on those around you. So again, another very, very powerful lesson by the one and only Wayne Dyer. I hope I did it justice, and I hope you got a lot of juice out of it. And lastly, like I shared with you guys on the last episode, we have 2 books now on Amazon that really go deeper into all of this type of mindset and self-awareness. The first one is The 7 Keys of Transformation, and the other one is called Living for Mondays. You should absolutely check them out. The links will be in the resource guide as always. And with that, have an amazing, amazing day, my friend, and we'll see you on the next Pep Talk.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.
Did you run through doors till you hit the floor? Did you read my eyes and my aching thoughts? Did you walk through walls till you had to grow? Oh my God, you're smiling.